to Daddy Daughter Wednesday. We are going to get into some of those stories with my dad.
So I'm thinking in my mind, he's thinking that my wife is by herself, or he's trying to do a Ricky Bobby move on her. Shake and bake, Ricky Bobby.
I have to tell my dad.
I grew up in a family where I didn't have a loving father. I didn't have a father that, as a kid, you have an image of what your father, your parents should be. And my father was not the image that I thought he should be, unfortunately, for a lot of reasons.
My dad has supported me and discussed with me leaving a job, getting a new job, emotionally abusive boss, a bad boyfriend, somebody who wanted to be my boyfriend and was trying to boss me around and manipulate me.
We wanted to share that with other fathers, other daughters, other family members that are out there that thinks that, oh, just because you're a child or you're a young adult has gotten of age that you still can't communicate. No.
They're always saying millennials don't like this and Gen Z's doing this and it's the boomers' fault.
We pass that stuff down. But how about the love passing down? That's generational wealth. We just felt so good about the Daddy Daughter Wednesday that we continue to do it. And this is the reason that we've come up with this podcast.
Welcome to Daddy Daughter Wednesday. We are going to get straight to it with the I Love My Dad Because part of the show, where we start off from a place of love by discussing reasons that I love my dad and my dad loves me. So I'm going to go first today. And I love my dad because he is an enthusiastic father, an enthusiastic family man, an enthusiastic educator. He has really taken the role of father to new heights. I feel like his love as my parent, as my protector, as my cheerleader has been such a constant in my life. And now that I'm a little bit older and have the opportunity to reflect more, I have just increasing appreciation for the way my dad parented me, the lessons he taught me, and how he has supported me throughout my life and really showed me how to both take on challenges and how to enjoy life wherever I am. And his resilience, especially his mental resilience, albeit he has physical and emotional and financial and spiritual resilience as well. His way of managing his mental to keep himself happy and healthy is something that I've never seen anyone do so well. And he has just honestly been such a gift to me, to my friends who maybe don't have as good relationships with their fathers, to the young people he's mentored, and even older people he's supported. And it really just made me want to share his message, share some of his ways of being. And we have always had a great relationship, but when we started Daddy Daughter Wednesday, which is our weekly calls, when we started Daddy Daughter Wednesday only 12 years ago now, it really allowed me to get to know him in an even deeper and brighter way. And it really empowered me to move through life differently. And I recognize it's such a privilege, and not everybody gets to have a dad like that, but I do. And I want to share what I've learned from him, share the warmth that I've been able to receive from him. And I love my dad because he is so rich in all the ways you would want to, like if you could build a smaller version of you, I feel like he maxed out trying to give me everything he could. So I love him for that. And I love him for just being himself as my dad. So tell me why you love me now.
Okay. I love my daughter because she is smart. She is courageous. She's strong and open-minded. She cares for others. She loves her family. And I like her spirit And as a father, as I look back upon her specifically, I look at her development and the way she has turned into such a wonderful black woman, and she has earned it all. So all the little tools that I shared with her while she was growing up, I really appreciated. She took those and she put them in her toolbox. And we talk about this metaphorically toolbox. And I've talked to her about it where now she is ready to get out in the world and do some work because she has some tools to do the work. So that makes me so proud of her. And the fact that I've watched her grow up and I've had some input in her development even makes me feel more proud of her. So she is a young woman and she's still finding a way in this world, but I am so pleased from where she's come in terms of her intellect, her knowledge about her environment, about her race, her culture, and how she's brought that into a business space. And this is where we find ourselves today. And talk a little bit about the daddy-daughter connection is when she first left home, and as a parent, if you had a child that's left home, she left home to go to school, and I just had to find some way for us to stay in this communication, although we were miles away. And that's why we came up with Daddy-Daughter Wednesday. And as she alluded to, this has been going on for 12 years. And even though she's out of school, she's graduated, she's done such a great job with that. We just felt so good about the Daddy-Daughter Wednesday that we continue to do it. And this is the reason that we've come up with this podcast platform, because we wanted to share that with other fathers, other daughters, other family members that are out there that thinks that, oh, just because you're a child or you're a young adult has gotten of age that you still can't communicate. No, 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 no. No, you're going to find this show is going to be so entertaining. It's going to be so rich with these type of conversations. And we're going to get into a lot of things that some might think is taboo, but in terms of daddy-daughter, this is all love. So we don't mind sharing the space with you. So again, thank you for lending your ear, and we hope that you find it enjoyable and entertaining. Again, thank you for coming into our Daddy-Daughter Wednesday space.
Yes, yes. Thank you for being here. And like my dad mentioned, we're going to get into a lot. And I feel like a father daughter pair like us is pretty rare. When I have spoken to people about us and what we're planning to do, and then given them examples of what we're going to talk about, they've been pleasantly surprised. So I want to do the same, a little teaser of kind of some of the things you can expect from us, and also just kind of summarize at a high level what's really some of the messages we hope you take away from this. So, as I mentioned before, my dad and I are very close. He is not only a provider and protector, but a safe space for me. And in the period of us going through our own Daddy Daughter Wednesday, my dad has supported me and discussed with me leaving a job, getting a new job, emotionally abusive boss, a bad boyfriend, somebody who wanted to be my boyfriend and was trying to boss me around and manipulate me. And I actually came to my dad first to get advice on that. Things related to body image, things related to losing weight and self acceptance, and things like that are all things that my father has supported me through, and he's done it in a really genuine way, weaving in his perspective as someone who went through the same stages, maybe in a different context. And I think that's really important because, at least for folks my age, I feel like on the internet there's a lot of what I call like generation bashing, where they're always saying millennials don't like this and Gen Z's doing this and it's the boomers' fault and this or that. And I think that, at least for me, it can be very discouraging when you see that. It makes you not want to reach out and enjoy perspectives from people of other generations. But I found that, especially through getting to know my dad, people really don't all feel like that. I'd say the majority of them, I don't know because I haven't met the majority of people, but many people of different generations, both younger and older, are interested in getting to know each other. If you're, respectful, if you're kind, if you're willing to, be genuine. And I have found connections with leaders or elders or people who are from a different time as me, whether older or younger. It's been one of the best learning experiences. It has been something that made me feel like I belong when the world was going awry. And I've learned so much accessing that knowledge. And I think sometimes, like with all the things changing in the world, as younger folks, we can get deterred or made to feel rejected from the older folks. And maybe some of them will reject you, but we just want to start a conversation of not intergenerationally rejecting each other, sharing knowledge and perspective and fun through different generations. And hopefully, through doing that, it'll help you feel inspired and just feel good about life and more ready to take on challenges, because I feel like that's the biggest constant we all have in life is trying to navigate challenges. So whether you're coming from my father's perspective, who, and he'll allude to that maybe later in a different episode, he had a very challenging home situation, a very challenging upbringing, and was able to revolutionize and redesign his entire way of being and make a beautiful, happy family, including me. And I was able to inherit that and continue that journey from a different vantage point. And I think there's importance in both sides, both the person who maybe didn't have those examples and the person who did. There's something for all of us. So that is my caveat I wanted to share about why we're choosing to do this and what you can expect to hear a little bit more about as you listen. So now we are going to get into some of those stories with my dad. The first one is going to be about stories to inspire you to embrace fatherhood. So the title of this episode is called Fatherhood is My Riches. And that was something that my dad really came up with to encapsulate how he feels about fatherhood and his journey as a father, and really, especially to speak to other fathers. I feel like um, my dad is so emotionally intelligent that this is a good space for fathers, especially to reflect on your contributions, your legacy. And even if you're in the space where maybe you don't have that exact relationship, maybe you can enjoy it with another family elder, an aunt and uncle, a grandfather, grandmother, or whoever is that person in your life that you can share a little love with. And for me, that is my dad. And he has loved me so much that he has loved me before I even got into the world. Okay. Like how much of a blessing is that when you have somebody who loves you before you even got into the world? And we're going to have story time with daddy, and he's going to share, I think, two stories that inspire you about fatherhood and remind you that fatherhood is your riches. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Dad.
Well, thank you. This is special to me. These stories that I remember specifically about my children and my daughter in particular that's sharing the show with me. This story begins before she was born, actually. And as a father, I'm going to say this. I grew up in a family where I didn't have a loving father. I didn't have a father that, as a kid, you have an image of what your father, your parents should be. And my father was not the image that I thought he should be, unfortunately, for a lot of reasons. As I became an adult, I understand those more now. So I had an opportunity to go through that period of my life and just think about, and I did, I fantasized a lot about what the ideal family should be, or what would my family look like when I became the head of my own family, when I became the chief of my tribe, and I consider myself the chief of my tribe, and we'll go into that a little later. But these particular stories, so that sets up the insight as to why I did the things that I did once I became married and I became a father. So after raising 3 children, when my last child came along, which is my daughter, I remember this story, and my wife and I were in we're going to say it was a large grocery store chain, right? So we're in the grocery store, and you can imagine we're shopping. My wife is very pregnant. I mean, she's out there. She's about 9 months. I mean, she was going for it in terms of getting out, getting exercise, staying in tune with grocery shopping. But anyway, so we're in the grocery store. We're in the grocery store, and you can imagine when you're in the grocery store, your cart is filled, you're getting ready to go to the checkout line. So my wife was pushing the cart in front of me. I was behind her, maybe 5 or 6 feet. And so I want you to imagine the grocery lines are pretty long, so there is an open cashier. And so as my wife is pushing the grocery cart up to the aisle, I noticed this, and I'm going to call him a mellow sapien. He was speeding up. He had a cart full of food as well. So I'm thinking in my mind, he's thinking that my wife is by herself, or he's trying to do a Ricky Bobby move on her. Shake and bake, Ricky Bobby. He tried to slide his full cart like he was trying to play cat and mouse with my wife. And so immediately I went up to him. I said, hey, player, wait a minute. Are you trying to run your cart into my pregnant wife? And I used some high-tech words. Those weren't the words I used.
Some high-tech words. That's a nice way to say it.
I looked at him in his face, and I was so serious because he thought that she was by herself. He didn't know that the protector of all protectors was just 5 feet behind her. So after I used these high-tech words with this gentleman, and I got right up in his face, this gentleman left his grocery buggy. He ran out the store, left it right there as though, oh my God, I made a mistake. And so that told me what his intent was. But as a father, I was just protecting my family. That included my wife and my unborn child at that time. And that resonates with me because I'm like, wait a minute. I can't allow this guy to run his buggy into the family jewels. No way. So, but anyway, that's a story. When I tell Paige about this before and after she was born, she really understood that because, again, I want you to imagine yourself at the grocery store. You got your groceries. You're trying to get to the cashier that's open, and here comes a random cart out of nowhere. But the reason I looked at that, and I was so protective because he didn't give my wife any consideration that she was a woman, that she was pregnant. It was just he felt that he should be in front of her, and he was going to do anything until he realized that, okay, she's got a 6'4" person that's coming up to me that's saying he's her husband. But anyway, I say that to say that's one of those stories as a father I remember so vividly. Now, this next story is going to segue right into the birth, and I was just so blessed to be a part of the birth of all my children. I cut the umbilical cord for all of my children. I was there in my moment with my wife. I was there in that moment with her. So this particular time, they had upgraded the way that families could enjoy this experience together by calling a birthing room. Now, with my other children, we didn't have a birthing room. And so a birthing room is a space where the baby can be delivered. You never have to leave the room. The doctors, the nurses, they bring all the things into the room that they need to deliver the baby. So to continue the story, so my wife had dilated and the process was taking place. So I'm there witnessing the birth of another one of my children. And again, as a father, that made me feel so proud to be able to witness that. And I encourage every man that's going through the process of right now of their loved one or their spouse, their wife, their girlfriend, their fiance, anybody that you have been half responsible for the child, be there. Get that experience. It changes your life. You don't think that you have the capacity to love. Oh my God, that opened up my love vault to be so big that it makes me smile just thinking about that I had an opportunity to witness these births of my children. But this particular day, I was so excited that After the process, she was born, she was delivered, they put her into an incubator. She was no more than 5 or 10 years, 10 minutes old, excuse me, 10 minutes old. So I left the room to call my mother. I was very excited about that. So I went out and told my mother, got her on the phone, said, hey, I just had my fourth child, and she's a girl, and I just wanted to share it with you, blah, blah, blah. So as I come back into the birthing room, I spoke and I said, where is she? She rose up. They had put her in a heating incubator where they do that with young or newborns so they stay warm. But when I came in the room and she heard my voice, and it's unusual for babies that young to be able to raise their head, to be able to move, but she raised her little head up and looked in the direction of where my voice came from. And it was such a moment for me because during the pregnancy, I would talk to her in my wife's stomach, and I would rub her stomach and I would tell her, "Oh, your dad's here. I can't wait to meet you." And I would sing songs. But that told me, as a human experience, how real that was. She recognized my voice without seeing my face. So that voice was power. And that's one of the reasons I believe that your words have power. My words resonated to her before she even came into this world. So that's one of those things, story time with dad, that's real. So fathers, if you're out there and you are expecting a child, talk to that child. Get to know that child before they come to the world. You can talk to that child through the womb of your significant loved one, your wife, your fiance, whoever this may be that you're expecting this child with. So I implore you to do that. Be there in the birthing room with them. Oh, that strengthens your relationship with your wife, your spouse, or your partner. Be there. That creates that love moment. And I'm looking at that, and you say, so why is that so important? Because now, years later, I still have a love affair with my daughter. We still are able to communicate, and that just shows me how powerful that moment was. So I wanted to share that with you and let you know, oh yeah, that was a special time. And I'm sure maybe some of you have experienced similar things, but story time with dad, those are the kind of stories you're going to hear from this program. So again, thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more to come.
Yes. I love that story. And I will talk about this a little bit more later in our psychology story, but I cannot really articulate how much it meant to me to know that somebody, more than one person, but especially my dad, had decided and committed to loving me for my entire life. Growing up, going to school where, bullying or even being made fun of or picked at is kind of a part of the experience. And, questioning your self esteem or your self worth as a result is kind of a common experience. I would very frequently think of things that my dad said to me, about how special I was to him, about how much I mattered to him, about how he was always going to be there for me and has been and is still there. And I want to highlight too, just on the daughter side, my dad said it's riches for him. Of course, fatherhood is his riches, but it's really rich for me because, man, it has helped me just shake off a little bit of hateration and holleration very easily. And that's actually what we're going to talk about next. So, this next segment is called I Had to Tell My Dad. And it's about times when I had to tell my dad to help navigate a challenge. And this first story really, I think, emphasizes what I'm describing about how when you have that consistent presence of a deeply loving father or mother, or like I said, maybe it's an aunt or uncle or grandparent or maybe somebody else. Having that love, if you can give that love to a young person in your life, please do, because it will help us navigate situations just like this. So the time I had to call my dad was, this time was when I was 10. So I was in the fifth grade, and I have been and always will be a proud Black nerd. I have been enthusiastically smart and nerdy my whole life. And normally that was okay, but at this particular time in the fifth grade, we had somebody who came from a different school and was kind of, getting the feel for everyone, and she wound up telling some people that I was a nerd. And we're all 10, so this is a big deal to me. And, me being me, she says I'm a nerd, and I want to figure out, did you actually say it? So I'm trying to come at it from an investigative angle of, who said it? Did you say it? When did you say it? So that really didn't get me anywhere, because if you know anything about 10-year-olds, like, it blows over as quickly as it starts. But it still bothered me that this girl had called me a nerd and really had me questioning an aspect of myself that I was so proud of and so comfortable with before. And this is like the important part, right? Whether it's a nerd, whether it's you're a tomboy for liking sports or whatever, sometimes there are these things that other kids will say to you and they really don't even know the impact of their words, but it can still sting a little bit. So I knew my dad was a safe place. I told my dad, Dad, at school today, this girl called me a nerd. And I'm pretty sure I went into, and then I tried to ask her about it. She didn't want to own up to it, but everybody saying it's her and blah, blah, blah. My dad saying, well, what's wrong with that? And I'm like, what? What do you mean? And he's like, well, what's wrong with being called a nerd? And I kind of was, I didn't know how to react. And he said, a nerd is just somebody who has the ability to learn things faster than other people. A nerd is somebody who has the ability to learn things faster than other people. And he did not stop there. He also said, because you have that ability to learn faster than other people, yes, you are a nerd, and that's not a bad thing. And sometimes people will not understand the good or positives of what you are doing because you learn things faster than them. You may have already learned that something is positive or good or helpful or exciting, and you're already pursuing that. And they might look at you like you're strange because they haven't figured that out yet. But it's okay. And be comfortable in that, because that happens a lot of times in life. And man, when I tell you, the one, like, being just the comment about a nerd being a nerd and how that's a positive thing about learning in itself, but making me feel good and okay about the fact that I would be mentally in another space from my peers, that I would make different choices than my peers, and that it was okay because I had knowledge or I had context or something that they didn't, and that I could, it could happen. And it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big deal if somebody said something to me. They can say that because you know something that they may not know yet. And that is just like, I wish I could replay that moment for kids across the world, because I really return to that moment so many times. Even in my corporate jobs as an adult, there have been times where I felt the equivalent of when I was called a nerd. And I think back to, like, well, they may not be able to see what you can see yet. So I had to call my dad when somebody called me a nerd, and man, I'm glad she did it, because I learned. I think I got such a good lesson that day, and I don't know if I would have even gotten it if I told you that. So, um,
So
I
let me chime in on that story. And I remember that
yeah,
story. And one thing I can say with you, as a kid, you had this ability to comprehend. And that's why I enjoy sharing those kind of things with you. So that was a strategy I employed with you, because I knew that you were going to face these type of situations more as you got older. So the psychology, and we're going to talk about the psychology later, and it's going to be called the psychology of affect. But the psychology here was to let you know that it's okay to be a nerd. That's just a label that they place on people that learn faster than others. We need more nerds, especially in our culture. We need a
Okay.
culture of nerds because what happens is we need to get
Can you say that
we need
again?
to get smarter fast as we can. So just think about it. If we all were nerds, if we had a culture or a community of nerds, look how advanced we would be. And then I knew at that time a lot of young kids that you were going to school with, they weren't thinking on that level. You had a gift to grab knowledge and understand it and be able to apply it. So I wanted to let you know that that was a good thing. They are just telling you how smart you were, but they were using a layman's term as a nerd. And then I talked about, okay, Bill Gates was labeled a nerd, and look what he's done. Um, there are some great nerds, and they are all doing well in business. The people that called them nerds, I'm sure when they were growing up, they're probably working for them now. So I wanted to let you know that that's a good thing when people call you nerds. And again, it's easier for me now to look back on that time to see where you come from. Oh my God. And you know this. You would agree with me. Being a nerd has worked out for you, hasn't it? Okay.
Woo! Oh my
Okay.
gosh,
Okay. That's
man.
all I'm going to tell you. Trust me. And we can talk about that later. So parents or fathers out there, if you are experiencing that with your young person, your daughter, especially because this is dedicated to daddy-daughter Wednesdays. We're talking about daddy-daughter situations. We're not forgetting about the boys, but we're not talking about the young men right now. We're talking about daddy-daughter specifics. And so I took the time to understand my daughter when she came to me with that because I thought it was great that, first of all, she would want to share something as young as she was about that. So I looked upon that as no, 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 no. We're going to get this weight off my daughter. This is an albatross. You're not going to tie an albatross on my daughter at this young age. So I gave her tools. I gave her empowerment tools. And so maybe somewhere down the line, she'll share what she told those folks when she went back to school. But from that point forward, I didn't hear her have too many other conversations about being a nerd or being described as a nerd. She took that as a badge of honor, and I love her for that because I knew that in the future she would have to rebound or come back and look at this situation and say, oh yeah, I've been called a nerd all my life, and thank you. Matter of fact,
Mm.
I applaud you for calling me a nerd.
Yeah, yeah. And on the daughter side, I want to highlight I'd say a couple of the things that my dad had already kind of established in our relationship that I think even made me feel comfortable enough to come to him because I've also heard of people saying, well, I want to have this kind of relationship, but XYZ won't talk to me. So even by the time I was 10, I remember a couple things about our relationship. I remember at least a few years before I was in that grade, you had let me know that I could always come to you and that I could tell you anything and
Anything.
that you would not judge me. And I remember when you had this conversation, and like I said, it was years before the nerd conversation. But that was another thing that I always thought about of like, oh, well, I could always go to him and I'm not going to get in trouble. And I think sometimes in kid terms, there's a lot of concern about, am I going to get in trouble? And sometimes kids don't even know really what that means. But being able to clarify to them, hey, if you have something that you want to talk to me about, that's nothing for you to be worried about. And my dad also made time to take interest in me and what I was doing. By the time I was 10, he knew some of the songs I like to listen to. He knew the names of my friends. He knew the secretary in the front
The
office
school.
at the elementary school. So when I said,
Yes.
Miss Such and Such said this, he knew exactly who Miss Such and Such was, and probably knew her husband too from just conversing and taking interest. So my dad had already done some work to create a space to make me feel comfortable speaking to him. So I wanted to highlight that if you're wondering, well, how can I set a tone where I make my daughter feel more comfortable talking to me? I'd say those things
Yes.
are a good start.
Yes, and to piggyback on that, you're exactly right. I just made it my business to know certain things about my children, especially my daughter, because I wanted to look through her lens. You know, and sometimes as adults, we get so busy with our lives, we just think about we look at life from an adult lens, right?
Mhm.
So I wanted to let my children know, yeah, I'm still an adult, I'm your father, but I want you to know that I will listen to you. And then we will make sense out of it, what you're saying. And I will get a good understanding. I will give you a chance to articulate it as best you can. And then I will give you my spiel on it. And I was always one that was open minded. And if it didn't make sense, I would say, that doesn't make sense. You know, no way does it rain up unless it's a windstorm. But so I gave her that freedom because, again, I'm looking for the future when she becomes an adult. And we have to have these conversations like we have now. They're so rich and they're authentic because I created that space for her to do that. And I'm so happy she did. And we talked through a lot of problems. We're going to talk about some of the projects that we worked through in the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, things that we did together. And again, I had more than one child, and I was that father. I gave them all that same type of attention. And do I look back? Yes, because I knew that it was daddy riches. This is what I call daddy riches. This was my $1,000,000. This was my golden prize to be able to support my family and my kids to help them navigate in this world. So again, I'm just all smiles right now. Daddy
Oh,
smiles, yes. But
yes. Like,
again, this is the kind of things that we're going to talk about, and some of the things are not going to be always this cheery. We got into some deep stuff, but these are the things that set up the stage. These are the foundation in the building blocks. So fathers, I want you to do not be ashamed to be emotional. Do not be ashamed to support, and don't be ashamed to listen. You're still the adult. All you're doing is helping your children navigate through this world, which they will be viewing in a very short time. 5, 10, 15 years goes by quick. But when you lay that foundation, man, you're going to be very happy that you did.
so beautiful. So we're going to go into the psychology corner that my father mentioned. And psychology corner is where we talk about kind of the psychological aspect of whatever theme we're discussing. And one thing I wanted to highlight too is that both my father and I have psychology credentials. I have a bachelor's in psychology and in comparative human development with a specialization in culture and community. And my father has a PhD in organizational psychology. Is that right?
Organizational management along with educational management. So I
Oh,
have
okay.
uh, a PhD in educational management with a specialization in organizational management or organizational psychology, and that is the study of organizations within an organization.
Mhm. For those of you who know me, you know I'm good at navigating the corporate world. That's why. Or I don't know if Dad, if you're on this side of my screen, but
No,
whatever
that,
side
yep,
you're on,
that was the
it's
side.
it's
Yep.
it's because of him, which would that's a whole nother episode because we do have one about some career stuff coming up. But I wanted to highlight those credentials, not to say that a classroom is the only way to learn, but there is a lot of misinformation on the internet. Some of it is people sharing their opinions that people take as fact, which is, that's fine. Opinions are all out there, but My father and I, we're going to reference some opinions, and we're also going to reference some peer reviewed research articles where it's not an opinion, like it's been proven. And I just wanted to emphasize that because we want to encourage you, if you're curious about any of these things, keep looking it up and learning after the fact. And yeah, it's more than just opinion, especially in this section, because there are some research based facts. So in today's psychology corner, we are going to talk a little bit on the psychology of father daughter relationships. And part of what motivated us to do that is because both of our backgrounds, like I mentioned, and we also value the opportunity to learn. And like I mentioned,
Yes.
there are people who come from all different vantage points. You may be like me, where you had a really strong positive example to learn from. You may not have had that. You may have been more of like my father, where he had to access different knowledge sources, both inside and outside of the home. And I think psychology research can be a positive way to access some of that knowledge. So that's why we wanted to chat a little bit about it. So, as related to the nerd story and what my dad mentioned about affirming me and encouraging me, that is actually affirmed by some psychology research. So there is a study, I believe, by Zia Malik and Ali, published in 2015, that shows a correlation between positive father daughter relationships and positive impacts on self esteem. The article I'm referencing here is called The Father Daughter Dance: The Relationship Between Father Daughter Relationship Quality and Daughter Stress Response. It's by Jennifer Bird Craven, Brandon J. Auer, Douglas A. Granger, and Amber R. Massey. So I'm just going to be doing kind of a high level overview of the research study. I mentioned the title and the authors, so if you're interested in digging a little bit more, you can Google those. But I really thought this study was a great one to start off the daddy-daughter conversation in the psychology corner, because this one fits really well with the theme of fatherhood is my riches. So basically, this story is about how the relationship between a dad and his daughter can affect the daughter's stress levels when she is a teenager or a young adult. This study found that daughters who felt their dads were warm, supportive, and gave them freedom had lower stress levels when talking to a friend about problems. But daughters who thought their relationships with their dads were full of rejection or chaos felt more stress when talking about problems with friends. So the study measured the feeling of stress using something called cortisol, which is like a stress hormone. They used the cortisol levels to measure how stressed the daughters felt. So it's kind of like a stress meter in the body. The researchers noticed that the daughters who had more supportive relationships with their dads had better stress meters, or better baseline stress levels that were lower. And as a result, or connected to this, they didn't get as stressed in tough situations compared to those who didn't have as supportive dads. So you can imagine, it's almost like if your dad is really supportive and kind, it might help you feel calmer and less stressed when you face problems as you get older. I think one big takeaway that I got from that is that a little bit of something is better than nothing, especially when it comes to your parent. Even though you may have the moment where your kids act like you're not cool or whatnot, what your parents say to you holds so much weight, especially if you continue to wield it well as we grow up. And for my father, talking with him is almost always positive. And I say almost because sometimes we have to talk about negative stuff, like if something,
Mm-hmm.
happens. But um, that I think over time made my mental spotlight kind of direct more to what does my dad say? What does he know about me? What is he saying about me? What do I experience from him versus what are these people saying about me? When you already have a strong foundation and self-concept that's being kind of co-developed with you at home, I think it's a lot harder for somebody to come in and disrupt that, because my dad is constantly building me up brick by brick every day. So if somebody else, tries to step in, it's a lot harder to knock down a 7-foot brick wall than, the wall that maybe somebody who didn't have that relationship had to build. Those were pieces of science evidence that I wanted to share to just offer even more encouragement to, like I said, those parent figures. Like my dad said, we're focusing on Daddy Daughter Wednesday. So I'm going to say
Right.
for dads and daughters, especially, focus on that because, man, like I can't tell you how much I love saying, my daddy said, that's not how it goes. Or my dad
Yes.
said I was smart. Granted, I didn't always do all this, but that's how confident I felt. Like, well, my father said I don't need to worry about that. Or even, and this will be another episode, when I was younger, after college, I was dating a guy who tried to pull a little okey
Ooh.
doke on me, and
Hmm.
the first person I called was my dad. And
Yes.
granted, yeah, it was a little. I was worried at first of how he would respond, but my dad was just like he promised, never judgmental, always on my team. And I think
Yes.
that the bottom line is the sooner you can let your kids know and show them that you are always on their team, the less they have to worry about all this other debris and noise of other people's perceptions of them or whatnot. We just want a good teammate. And by making this, you're already on the pathway to do it if you choose to.
Absolutely, Paige. Well stated. Now, I appreciate the research base. Now, I'm going to talk about some empirical knowledge or some things that may not be of research base, but I call this life experience. You can learn from life experience. So, raising 4 kids and being married as long as I've been married and watching life unfold in front of you. And in this psychology corner spot, there's a lot of psychology that goes on in real life that we participate in every day. And I'm going to start off with this. First of all, I believe that your words have the ability to create as well as destroy. Agree. Again, your words have the ability to create and to destroy. I use my words to create. I supported my children, my daughter, with positive words because I wanted to create. And I know so. Somewhere in the Bible, I think it was John that talks about in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word is God. So that told me right there that the Word is powerful. Because that's where, in the beginning, it was nothing, it was the Word. So I've used that Word to create positiveness in my family. Although there was always going to be some negative stuff. But that Word helped me to become and help to define my value system. And what is your value system? My value system was family, learning opportunities, understanding legacy wealth, coaching, training, and being a volunteer from a community's perspective. Because when you use your word to create, you're very mindful of what you say. You're very mindful of what you don't say. You're very mindful of when you use those words. So when it came to my daughter, I was very mindful of how I use my words with her as of today. So you can live these things, and you have lived. I'm sure fathers, I'm talking to you fathers right now. You have lived some things that they may not have been all right when you first did them with your family, and you may not have known what you were doing. You may not have a purpose, but now I want you to know that all those things collectively mean something. The said and unsaid things. And sitting here listening to my daughter, it was so many times we had rich conversation that I learned from her, she learned from me, but I take responsibility as being the leader. And I am just so happy to see that these weren't lessons or stories or conversations that went by the wayside, that she took some of those and put in her treasure chest or her toolbox so she could bring them back out and apply them when she needed them. So this part of our psychological corner is very important. And I want dads to know you play a very big role in this. You don't have to have a PhD to do these things. You don't have to be the smartest guy on the block. What you do have to bring to the table, and I'm going to recommend this with every meal, every conversation, every short story, is this ingredient: love. Bring love. Make love your number one ingredient when you're talking to your kids. You're talking to your wife, your significant other. You make sure that love is there, because love can only transcend to happiness. People say, "Oh, I did out of love." Well, I don't know. Am I happy? You do things out of love. And I try to employ that in my psychological approach to my family. And as my daughter just told you, that I was non-judgmental, because I know some of the information that may be coming my way from her may not be something I wanted to hear, may not be something I was ready for. But because of my position as the patriarch, I had to be ready for that. As the chief of my village, everything that comes to the chief is not always happy-go-lucky. That's, oh, it's, no, it's some tough stuff come to the chief. But the chief was ready for it. So I was glad, again, that she was able to decipher some of the things from those conversations, that she could utilize them later on. But it is a lot that goes into it. So parents, dads, moms, if you're listening, especially the dads, employ some of those things that we just talked about. Make sure you have a heavy dose of love whenever you start to talk with your children about anything that they're experiencing in this life. Because remember, we're all in the same world. They're just young kids or even older, but still they are young people trying to find their way. And you have some experience because you came before them. Share the experience. You know, be truthful in that experience. And sometimes you say, oh, the truth hurts. Not as much as not knowing the truth. Not knowing the truth hurts more than the truth itself. So employ that. And thanks again, Paige, for sharing that story. And I look forward for more of those when we hit this segment in the future, talking about Psychology Corner, because there's a lot that goes into that. And again, we're not trying to be therapists for anyone. We're just sharing some positive experiences, telling you what we know that works. Water was wet. I can tell you this. It was wet yesterday. It was wet 2 weeks ago, 200 weeks ago, 2,000 weeks ago, 2,000,000 weeks ago. So if someone tells you water is not wet, you need to question that, because we know water is wet. Those are facts. So again, moving along, that's what I have to end on in terms of understanding psychology of relationships in our Psychology Corner. So thank you for listening.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for that perspective, Dad. Because I think what you mentioned, it feels so obvious, but I feel like it's so overlooked sometimes in the conversation of passing things down generationally. Like we
Okay.
hear so much about passing down generational wealth, but what about generational love?
Yes.
Like the generational love. Are you passing down love? That is so important. That is the generational wealth because and I'm
Yes.
saying this from a perspective of someone who's, has enough to survive. So obviously if you're, struggling there, you do need more than love. But at the end of the day, what is all the money and everything, what is it really giving if you don't like yourself? And I think that's important because in retrospect, I can see now in a lot of ways my dad taught me how to like myself by modeling both positivity towards himself, which I would say, and I'm going to get into this later, I would wonder that's probably revolutionary for a man of your age at the time you were coming up. Um, I would imagine, but my dad really modeled a self love for himself that was not oppressive or comparative or about putting others down. but really a way of him being in his own head in a very positive way. And that has carried with me because sometimes I hear his voice when I'm like talking to myself, when I'm trying to work something out. Sometimes when I'm looking for guidance, I think like, well, dad would say this, or like dad would say, that's excellent. And sometimes I even say it in his tone of like, okay, you did that. And it's like a little piece that I get to carry with me. And so when I say generational love, it doesn't have to be anything huge or one big one time thing. It can be the little things like that, just passing down how to talk to yourself nicely, how to passing down, positive thoughts or remarks that your child can remember later on.
Absolutely.
Eh,
Can I interject real quick,
sure,
Paige, because
of
that
course.
reminds me of uh, of a story where when I was working in the capacity of uh, a high school administrator, and I have the ability to have young folks come to me and just talk with me and share their stories. So this one particular time, I don't know if you recall this because I've done it a number of times with you during this time, they would come in my office and I would call you on the phone
Yeah, I
because I
do
would
remember.
use you as an example of what they could be. And these were young ladies that didn't know their fathers, right? And
Hmm.
they would tell me these incredible stories and I was like, no, no, no. But this is what you can do. You can change your life. Just because you started off this way doesn't mean you have to end that way. And I would talk to them and I say, here's an example of what you can do when you have the right folks in your corner and you're trying to change your life. You'll get help. And my daughter is here to tell you they didn't believe me that you could attend college or a prestigious college and do the things that you did. So I would call you up and you were available those times. That was just a godsend there. And I would put you on speakerphone and they would be in my office and you would tell them the story or whatever we were discussing and you would give them your perspective as a young person that's finding their way and just recently graduated from high school and on their way to college. And they got so much out of that conversation. Those young people to the point where even after school, I recall this, and some of my colleagues remind me of this today when I talk with them. I can't believe you had those young people lining up after school to talk to you. This is after school. School's over. And I had a policy, I had 5 open chairs in my office. First 5 that got there, after you went to class, and I would verify that you had to be in class, I would talk to you about anything. But that was a rich conversation. That led into that community piece. And I think the psychology of that is when you can show love and administer love in one place, you have the ability to share that love. And I called upon that ability so many times because I'm like, I have enough love to share. And it changed those young people's lives. It changed the way they saw themselves. It changed the way they viewed learning and the way they carried themselves. So I was so thankful that I could call you as a reference and have you speak to them because a lot of times people may feel that, oh, you're just telling the story, you're making this up. No, 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 no. I would get on the phone and say, let me call this person up. And it was impromptu. We didn't rehearse it, right? I just called you and you happened to be available. And guess what? Those young people got so much out of that. So again, experience in life, lived lessons. We talk about research-based psychology, but this is just life lessons too. That's important. And I take all that into our conversations. There's so much richness in actually coming out living life, right? And then going back and evaluating things and say, I could have did this better. Well, I'm looking at this different now. And to better yourself, because at the end of the day, every day, we have to try to get better. And that's one of the aspects I appreciate about you, Paige, that you took that on and you've gotten so much better with your life being a young black female in this world that's against you. Just say it like that. That's the honest. But you've been able to navigate your way based on some instructions from your parents, especially, I'm going to say from me, because I know that by pouring into you, that you would be able to pour into others. And we're going to talk about that later, because I love the fact that you are willing to help others and you've taken out your day, and a lot of times without cost, because most of the time people want cost. Now, as a professional, yeah, we have to have some type of compensation. But this was way before that you've taken out of your time. So I'm going to end it right there without giving away the real story. But you've done such a wonderful job, and I'm so proud of you for that.
Oh, thank you, Dad. We have two more segments, generational perspective and daddy-daughter favorites. So on generational perspectives, I wanted to ask if we could do a compare and contrast about
Okay.
fatherhood as you knew it when you were a child, being fathered when you were growing up, compared to fatherhood as you know it today. I only have two questions.
Okay.
They are, what has changed and what has remained constant,
Okay.
in your opinion?
With me now, are we want to talk in general, or you want to talk about specifics to how I had to reinvent my family from my perspective as a father and what a father should be?
Ooh, I think
Well, that's
maybe
good.
in terms of generalizations, like maybe if you were speaking to the same audience, and maybe there's another father
Okay.
listening who will want just wants to hear from
Okay.
that perspective, kind of high level.
Well, let me just say this, because growing up, and I grew up in the 60s, the late 60s, from a kid. And I used to see, I was a happy go lucky kid, but a lot of men were not, and this is just from my perspective, and I know there's going to be other perspectives, but for me growing up, and I grew up in the hood, and I didn't see a lot of fathers that stayed with their families, right? I saw a lot of negative things. I saw a lot of spousal abuse. I saw a lot of alcohol abuse. This is from some of my friends' fathers that I did see. I saw a lot of what I'm going to say now is that, looking back on it now, is that those men felt defeated as black men. And the reason why is the way they carried themselves, the way they intertwined with their families. And again, this is not all the fathers, just from my perspective. And so, and I use that perspective to say, these are the things that even as a kid, I challenged. And talking about my own situation, where my mother was divorced and I got a stepfather. My stepfather was not the father that I wanted him to be, because I was one of those kids that I played sports. I played every sports. In the summer I played baseball. In the fall I played football. Then we went into basketball. So I was one of those high energy kids, and I didn't get that support from my family, from my father.
Can I emphasize too,
Sure.
without saying too much, um, because I definitely think there is valid, right, to say that he wasn't the father you wanted him to have. I go as far to say, without getting too deep into it, there was, abuse in the house.
Oh yeah. Oh
And I
yes.
just want to name that
Okay.
because
Yeah.
there may be somebody else who's going through that, and just saying he wasn't the kind of father I wanted him to be. While that's like really,
Yes.
it's like,
Generic.
it's a nice way to say it, but
Yeah.
we want to connect with people. So if,
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna go and be
yeah,
real.
somebody else might have that situation, and this, I
Absolutely.
think, is even more genuinely powerful to show someone can come from a
Absolutely.
different type of context, very different. Now hearing that he wasn't just not the kind of father he wanted him to be. He was abusive.
He was an abusive father.
So
Okay,
yeah,
and I'll talk
so
about that because that keeps it real. And I'm going to go
yeah,
back a little bit. Okay, and I will. And when my mother married this gentleman, he was a drinker. He was a gambler. He did go to work, but he didn't spend a lot of time with his family. He was he abused my mom from a domestic perspective to the point where they would fight every night when he got home. And I remember this went on for years until I was like 14 and my oldest brother was 16. And we got together and had a meeting one day, and said, if my stepdad comes home and tries to jump on my mother one more time, we getting him. We jumping on him. And that's a 14 and a 16-year-old saying that. So you can only imagine how that went on. So eventually, and he was not the kind of a male figure that I grew up to say, I want to be like him. No, no. I want to have communications with him. Nope, nope. And he's passed on now. But I'm just saying, as a kid growing up, I saw this. And that also helped to channel the type of man I wanted to become. Because I said, and I said this as a kid, 14, 15-year-old, when I have a family, I'm never going to do this to my wife. I'm not jumping on her. I'm not fighting. I'm not verbally abusing her. I'm not going to use alcohol and drugs to try to have a false effect in my relationship or show my genuine love. So all those things I experienced, but I look back and I'm telling you, this is what changed me. I made up in my mind then what I wasn't going to do when I became an adult man and I had a family. I said what I was going to do. And again, I look back now, and earlier I talked about that word. That word was power. I used my words for power. I told myself, I'm not going to do this. I told myself, I will do this. I will be a loving man. I will be a loving father. I'm never going to leave my kids. I'm never going to leave them down and out, no matter what they go through. And I look back now and I think, wow, that was powerful. But if you're in one of those situations where you find that your father is not the kind of man that you want him to be, or the kind of father that you think he should be, and you can't talk to him, I suggest that you talk to another adult. Talk to somebody that can help you through it. Because with me, I was just so blessed that I had this ability to reason certain things to myself. And I look back and I go, these are things that I'm not going to do. But these are things that I am going to do. And I look forward to those positive moments in my life. And so, again, the reason that we're talking about this, because it's come to fruition. No, it wasn't always peaches and creams. I remember some nights when my mother and my stepfather got into fights. This is on a school night, because he worked nights. He got off in the middle of the night. So we would have to leave the house in our pajamas and underwear because they were fighting so tough. My mother would run, y'all get y'all clothes, get y'all stuff, well, whatever you could get. And we would just run out of the house into the driveway, right? Get into the car and go over to my aunt's house. And as a kid, you was like, why are we doing this once or twice a week? Something's wrong with that. But again, that helped my framework as to what kind of man that I wanted to become, what kind of father I wanted to be. And in that example, I use my stepfather's actions to understand, no, that's an example of what I don't want. I don't want to be like him. No, something wrong with this. Because it always disrupted our environment, no matter what we had going on, if loving situation, if we had a great day, he would find a way to disrupt that. So I said to myself, I want to be more of a positive man to my family. I want to be one that brings happiness, right? Because again, I'm looking down the road, somewhere down the road, this is going to pay off for my family. And so here we are today. We're talking about it. But we have to take you through this to understand, no, 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 no. It wasn't always this way. I just didn't grow up, in this family. I made a decisions. Fathers, husbands, brothers, sisters. If you're out there, make a decision what type of person you want to be. Tell yourself that. Use your word to create, not to destroy. So, and I look back now, and I didn't even know that this was what I was particularly doing, but I understand why now. This is part of my philosophy in using my words to create versus using my words to destroy. Our platform is using our words to create, not to destroy. And in this situation, we're talking about positive relationships, the psychology of affect and relationships. And so we want to affect you in a positive manner. Just knowing, no. You're looking at a man who has, as they say, got it from the mud. I had to learn. And we're going to talk about all these, some things or some methods that you can use to do the same thing. You don't have to have $1 million. You don't have to have a silver spoon in your mouth. But you can make changes. You have to be committed to it. Use your words in a positive way. Commit to them, and things will come to you. You will become a magnet of success. Success will seek you out.
Yeah. And to add on to what he mentioned, he made a different choice. And I just want to emphasize you can too. I have met so many people who are even as young as my age who are like, oh, I didn't do the right thing and now it's over for me. As long as you're still living,
That's right. It's never
may
over.
the opportunity to choose different is available to you. And don't be ashamed to choose it. Don't shame yourself for not having chosen it earlier. Just take the opportunity and keep going because um, it's challenging. And I find so many people, when they want to do something new, they try to approach themselves from a place of shaming, like from a place of self shaming, where they say, I need to get it together or blank, blank, blank. But you got to be strong with your word. That's what my dad's talking about, to emphasize. He's not talking about going out and giving a big speech. He's not talking about publishing something online. He's not talking about making a new Instagram post. He's talking about the way you use your words first with yourself, and then the words that you are willing to speak out into the world. And those things you can control, you can change, you can adjust anytime you want. You can start right at this moment. And that's just one thing I wanted to
Yes.
clarify because I think sometimes we think, oh, to change, I have to get a great new job, or I have to reinvent myself, or I have to announce to everyone that things are going to be different. It starts with you treating yourself different up here and talking to yourself differently, and just you deciding to stay the course. That's it.
Yep. Yes. Well stated. I agree.
Yeah. Um,
And Generate, you said something earlier that, again, it means so much. And sometimes we are void of this. Passing down love. Because we so quickly pass down hate and discontentment and idle gossip. We pass that stuff down. But how about the love passing down? That's generational wealth. And I look at that. And we can have more, and people tend to think of generational wealth as monetary. No, it's not only monetary. It's the way you're willing to help, that you can show you can be a help. It's the teaching, your ability to retain knowledge, to inform, to persuade others in your family. And then the thing to do is be consistent with it. And sometimes you have to, you have to stop and pause and think about, reflect on what you're doing. But if it's intentional, it will pay off for you. And I'm here to say that I am 150% sure that it works because I've lived it. This is not something I'm guessing at. I'm telling you it's successful black man who has made it through a number of challenges in his life. When
It
people
made
looked
a
at
little
me,
version of him.
and then come up with a little version. When people looked at me and said, "You're not going to be nothing," I'm like, "Well, you're not my God. I don't believe anything you're saying because you're not my God. You didn't make me. You can't tell me what I'm going to do." And to make the decision to be successful, fathers, brothers, uncles, those of out there who are patriarchs of your family or want to start a family, first of all, make a decision that you want to be successful, that you want to have a loving family, that you want to be a strong father, that you want to be a strong husband, that you want to be a strong companion. Make that decision right now. Tell yourself this, because your word has power. It has the power to create. It has the power to destroy. Which one will you use your word for? I'm using my words to create in my family, in my community, in every situation I find myself in. I'm using my word to create. Thank you.
Lovely.
Yes.
Thank you. Um, so for the last section, we have daddy daughter favorites, which are forms of media, whether it's videos, books, movie clips that we think relates to the theme of what we're talking about and made us smile. The
Okay.
first one is one of me and my dad's favorite commercials, and it always makes me think of him because people would see this father in this commercial who was very supportive and engaged in what his daughter was doing and got right in there and was participating with her, even though it didn't look like a perfectly masculine activity. And people would always see the commercial and say, like, Paige, the way that dad is like so eager to jump in and practice with his daughter, no matter what people are saying, reminds me so much of your father.
One.
Here I have the first video from Daddy Daughter Favorites queued up. Like I mentioned before, this was that commercial I was describing. So I'm going to go ahead and press play.
Oh, those boys are much too much. Those boys are much too much. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We're going to beat them and bust them. Beat them.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Let's get a little bit rowdy. ROWDY.
Take time to be a dad
One more time.
today.
All those boys are much too much. Those boys.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely one of my all-time favorites right there as a dad. That spoke right
Yeah.
to me when Thank you for joining us for our first Daddy Daughter Wednesday episode. We hope that you leave feeling encouraged and inspired to navigate through life's complexities. If you haven't done so, please hit the subscribe button so that you may stay up to date on all the Daddy Daughter Wednesday episodes. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Bye.